but they were independent. Le système est un indépendant.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We've heard that some of the sessions are running a bit late, so we would like to give people a couple more minutes to come into this session, if that's okay. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome again to the Business and Strategy session. Can we have the agenda slide back, please? Thank you very much. Again, welcome to the RDA Business and Strategy session. My name is Stefanie Ketas. I'm the RDA Director of Operations, and I'm here to introduce the speakers of this session. You can see the agenda there. You will get updates from all the governance bodies and the Secretariat. And finally, I would like to say if you have questions, please ask your questions after each person's report. And finally, just a reminder, if you would please vote in the council elections. The elections are open until the 4th of April, I think, but if you do it now, you won't forget. Thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Hilary for her Secretariat report. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, so good afternoon. I understand that all the sessions are running on, so that's a really encouraging and important thing. But we also feel that this is very important. So you can kind of think about this as a general assembly, if you like, and our update on where we are with RDA and what we're doing in between all the times that you see us. So I'll call this the member update, and it's from the Secretariat. I just check it. Oh, there we go. So just to put this into perspective, when I know you see this a few times, but it's important to do the distinction when I go through some of the updates I'm going to give you. So we talk about the work of RDA, that's the community work, the groups, interest and working groups, and the BOFs and all that sort of thing. And then the business side, which is the supporting that, okay? And it might be evident why I split the two out and make a point on it now. So just to remind you of the structure, this is for those of you who are new, particularly to RDA. So this is our sort of organogram, if you want to call it like that. The membership underlying the working and the interest groups, so therefore the work of RDA. And those yellow boxes that you see, the Technical Advisory Board, Secretariat, the Organisational Advisory Board and Council. On the edge you see the foundation. The foundation is the legal entity that represents all the members. It's a non-profit entity and sometimes also referred to as global, which is an interesting concept, but I'm going to call it the foundation. And then we have the Funders Forum on the edge there because, as you know, and I will show you who they are to remind you, we have a group of funders who directly support us and other funders who aspire to support us. But they are sort of not, I would like to say, inside that organogram at least. So who are our shareholders or our community? It's called that. So almost 6,800 community members. And you can see the global breakdown there, 136 countries, and then the regional aspects in the pie chart. So Europe, North America are large, shall we say, contingents, and then the other groups. Okay, so we talk about this 6,700 members. Who currently supports RDA financially in terms of funds, and they come in different ways, but we have the European Commission, the National Science Foundation, the Australian Government, JISC in the UK, the MacArthur Foundation in the US, NIST in the US, and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. And we've been supported by these international organisations in one way or another and at different, shall we say, stages since 2012. Who are our other supporters? And I mean, when I say that, I mean in terms of funding. our 43 organisational members. You'll hear more about the organisational board, but I would like to highlight them. Our 43 organisational members are fee-paying members, so they are also contributing to our global budget. So, in terms of, how would you say, figures, I think this is the figure I'd like. It's an estimated effort, and we have a sort of, how would you say, a criteria or an algorithm to work this out. But we're looking at about 124, 125 full-time employees per year. We estimate based on just for the work of RDA, and I think that's quite a conservative estimate, but it's also true that it is based on more active or less active members. Just to note for those of you, I mean, a member can be an observer, a contributor, a driver. So our 6,700 members interact with us in different ways. Some contributing in a larger way, but we would say about 125 FTEs. So the business of RDA, and this again is an estimated effort given, based on the number of people supporting each of the boards. So somebody asked me the other day in the newcomers session who were the numbers, and there they are. So on Secretariat there are 9 people. There are, TAB has 13, OAB has 8, Council has 9 people. Okay, so there's a total of about 40, and the estimated effort is about 7 FTEs. So I'll just move to the Secretariat. So our core, so the Secretariat, by the way, is the one of the 4 yellow boxes that we should say is funded directly to support the daily operations of RDA, and it covers those 8 different bullets and many more besides. But we try to, how would you say, bunch them in under those 8 points. It's funded in an in-kind way, so the staff are provided to the Secretariat directly through their organisations and from the different regions and the 9. So as you can see, I mean, there's clearly a huge amount of work for the Secretariat, a lot of work around the groups, particularly working on the interest groups and everything from this that would cover their life cycle. And of course plenaries, which are a hugely labour-intensive activity for the Secretariat, all the web aspects and communications. There's also a business development and fundraising aspect for the Secretariat, and reporting back, of course, to our stakeholders, so the members, you, our funders and organisers, etc. And then there's the organisational governance and the administration of the global organisation. Okay, so they're mainly the core services that the Secretariat look after, and that's what you see. So we have, shall we say, a core team. Thank you very much. So through these 11 people, shall we say, well, 10 plus myself, there's about 2.5 full-time employees doing all that work, okay? So I think they do, and that's what's put on paper, but I think I could probably say that they do an awful lot more. There's a lot of overtime done by these wonderful people, so they're very good, and I'm very lucky to have them as a virtual team. So a few other highlights, things I wanted to note to you, because then there'll be the other parts, but one aspect that has been worked on, and I wanted to highlight it to you, you'll see the link at the bottom of the page there, is the Code of Conduct policy. So at a big organisation like ourselves, it's a good idea to have a code of conduct. I think it safeguards very much you, the members. So we had put out a policy definition, if you like, for requests for comments and feedback from the community, which we received. Thank you very much. We've had a lot of advice from other organisations of a similar nature and smaller on codes of conduct. And we have gone back with the comments as well to the community, and then had a policy approved by Council. And the policy you can see now on that link. What I'd like to highlight about it is, of course, clearly we have, I think, 2 main areas in which we need to work on the process the definition of the process and also the implementation then of that, because we have a whole area around events and also the actual virtual environment and framework that we have. But we have put a timeline out for you there, as you see. So we're going to work on the Secretariat on outlining the procedures and processes, define them. You will be kept updated, by the way, and then on November we will have an implementation. And we see this as a very living policy and processes as it moves along and as it is implemented. So just to let you know, that's I think an important piece of work on the Secretariat that we are, and all the other boards are, of course are helping us out with that. Stephanie mentioned at the beginning, so we have council changes that I would like to highlight. So you see we have 3 outstanding council members who are finishing their term with us now at the end of the month. Satoshi, unfortunately, is not here with us in Berlin, but Michael and Doris are. And as I said in my opening, service on or effort on the council and the dedication is such a huge service to the RDA community, and probably not always so visible or anything, but they really have done outstanding work in their 3-year term. And I would like to ask you to thank them very, very much for their work and what they've done for us. So they're there. Michael and Doris. Okay, so of course that leaves the three slots open, and we have a procedure. It's on the website clearly about. We had a call for candidates, and then the nominations committee concluded their work recently, and we now have a slate of new candidates. Ingrid, whom you will be many of you familiar with, and who did a wonderful job as the interim Secretary General. So we are very lucky that she's actually decided to stick with us and go on council. Jason Haga from AIST and Claudia Medeiros from FAPES, I think I have to say, as well as the University of Campinas. So the voting is open now. You'll see it on the homepage, by the way, because it was noted, I think, that it's maybe not visible, but I think it should be in big red letters. And basically you log in and you accept or reject the slate. We'll close voting on the 4th of April, and we will inform the members of the outcome of the vote on the 5th. And in the eventuality that the slate is accepted, then these new council members will take up office then. Okay. And that's it. I think I'm finished on the brief update from Secretariat. But you might have questions or things that you'd like me to clarify, or things that you would like to know what we are doing, because we have a big, huge, long operational plan. But I wouldn't dare to bore you with that. But it's all clear, is it? Good. So I will now hand over to Kevin on the Organisational Advisory Board and Assembly update.
Thanks, Uri. So I'm Kevin Ashley. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Organisational Advisory Board, along with Amy Nürnberger, who you're going to be hearing from in a moment. So this is a very brief update on what OA and OAB is and what we've been up to since the last plenary. So we thought we ought to begin by decoding a little of this alphabet soup that unfortunately meetings like this tend to be full of, and clarify that there are organisational members. You've seen the slide already that Hilary shared. I'll show you again in a moment, who are meant to provide this organisational perspective on the work of RDA and enhance and particularly help with the implementation of the output of RDA working groups, and also help assess the extent to which the outputs of the groups are indeed implementable, because they vary greatly as to where they are in terms of maturity. There's the organisational assembly, which draws together those organisational members, along with a small number of organisations that RDA has affiliation agreements with, which are mutual agreements. And in the early days of RDA, the assembly was also a board. that interacted with Council, but the Assembly very rapidly has grown to the stage where the board effectively has to be elected from all those organisational members. So the Organisational Advisory Board is the smaller group, the subset of the Assembly elected regularly from its members to represent the interests of the organisational members and interact with the other governing bodies of RDA to make sure our interests are taken into account. So there again is a slide you've just seen a moment ago representing the variety of the members that we have. Clearly, I'm not going to attempt to go through all those, but you'll see there's a big range, although they're nearly all research performing organisations of one sort or another, but there are also infrastructure providers in there, but both a big geographical range and a big range in terms of the size of organisations as well. And overlaid on that, this is our attempt to represent those different categories, the Assembly and the Board, which is the subset of it. So that board, we've recently gone through an election procedure. Amy has recently been confirmed as the co-chair. My term of office is partway through. We also have Juan Bikaregui, Siddhartha Guru, Jason Hager, Mark Leggett, Raphael Ritz, and Joost Wagenaar. And I should point out we actually have some empty spaces on the Organisational Advisory Board if others are interested in getting access to and influencing the activities of RDA. Do come and approach us after this. So a brief summary of the work that we've been engaged with in the last 6 months. We used to have problems, I think, as with any global organisation in scheduling meetings that allowed everybody to get equal access to and representation. We've established a regular schedule now in which the dates are always the same and we just rotate between time zones. This has been a mechanism, I think, that other bodies such as the TAB have already used, and it does seem to be helping to some extent. Nothing is perfect. We were involved in the selection of the new Secretary General, and I think it's no secret we're extremely happy with the result that's come out of that, but it's a pleasure to be able to influence what is something that's quite significant, I think, for the direction that the RDA takes. We've been working on identification of organisations that we think ought to be part of the Assembly, ought to be contributing to this, in particular looking at attendance and involvement in working groups, identifying organisations where there are many, many individuals involved, but the organisation itself is perhaps not aware of the extent to which it's contributing to the work of RDA. And in some cases, I'm sure many of you, if you come from larger organisations, may have had the experience that you've turned up to a plenary and are surprised to encounter a colleague. What are you doing here? You may often say, and that's not uncommon, and that often means that the organisation itself is unaware of that level of contribution. We've been pursuing the development of a number of new organisational member benefits, and I hope we'll be able to say more about that in the very near future. And we'll be providing feedback, as I mentioned before, on adoption, and particularly on the fitness for use of a number of RDA group outputs that hopefully informs how they're going to be maintained or how they're going to be built on by future groups. If you're interested in becoming an organisational member, this is the scale of charge that are levied depending on the size of the organisation. But we do have a free try before you buy option available. The Organisational Assembly will be meeting tomorrow, slightly earlier than it says in your programme, so immediately after lunch at 2 p.m. You're welcome, if you're interested in exploring this, to come and attend that meeting once only and work out if your money be well spent. And I can assure you, I believe it will be. That's all. If there's any questions on that, I'm happy to take those now. And if not, I'll be handing over, I believe, to Francoise.
Do you hear me? Yes, I guess so. So I think many of you see TAB members in the sessions. We try to cover all of them. All the groups have a TAB liaison, so the liaison or someone else is in the sessions. We are not completely able to cover all the sessions, but we do the maximum for that. If you don't have a TAB member in your sessions and you want to talk to someone, please don't hesitate to come to any of the TAB members We are really here to talk with you and to try to help you to help on your activities in the RDA. So the tab is now 13 members. We were 12 since nearly the beginning of the RDA. The Council kindly agreed to increase the tab membership by 1 member per year on 3 years, so this helps because there are many things to do for tab. So we have this update in the number of members, and so this means there is also an update ongoing on the RDA government document to reflect the fact that the tab membership has changed and there are rules which will evolve on the elections and so on. So just a short report on the last big bunches of tab activities during the last months. One of the huge work has been the session scheduling for this plenary. The RDA received 84 proposals for sessions, 17 both, 36 interest groups, 19 working groups, and 12 joint sessions. In P10, they were less. I forgot to write the number, but there were 16 boths, 37 interest groups, 14 working groups, and 6 joint sessions. One thing we have been evolving in the last year or so has been that we have begun to contact more often the proposers to make suggestions to improve their session description. So the point is that the session, we all know that the participants in the plenaries have some difficulties to choose where they want to go or what is the best for them to go among the many sessions. And so we have insisted a bit we have a good template for the session proposals, and we have really asked people to give as much information as possible to help the members to make an informed choice for their participation in the different sessions. We have to say that the proposals have been extremely responsive. When we asked for improvements, we got the improvements very quickly, and we have to thank everybody for that, because I know that it's already a work to do those proposals. In this case, it was between Christmas and New Year Eve, so it was not the best time of the year to propose a session for the RDA. And people have been extremely responsive when we suggested improvements, and I think it's good for everybody in the RDA. Another thing we have seen while dealing with the session proposals is that funders and research organizations are proposing both sessions for their own topics. And what is very interesting to see is that this means that funders and research organizations come in front of RDA membership to discuss openly of many topics. So this is interesting to see that the people who give us the money or support are also using the RDA way to discuss topics of interest for them, which means bottom-up, being here in front of everybody, and openness. We all owe special thanks to Wenbo Shu from TAB and to Timea Biro and the Secretariat team, because they managed to make the real scheduling and of these plenaries happen. And this is not an easy job, so we all owe them a lot, because we are here and things work well, in addition to the work which is done by the local organizers. This is something which is behind the scene and which is very important. So another thing we have seen is that plenaries remain major milestones for the organization. We saw this meant a bit more work for TAB. We had 14 new or updated case statements received linked to the P11 session call, which means that this is really a milestone. When you have a case statement for a group which has been waiting for a while, or you have to update something, you feel obliged to do something. In some cases, we ask the question, I have to say, but not always. And this means there is lots of activity going on to prepare the plenary. So another activity which is shared with the chairs, the group chairs, is that we have a tab meeting with chairs every time there is a plenary, and there was one just before the plenary this time on Tuesday afternoon. And tab also has participants in the collaboration meetings which are organized by the chairs every 6 months in between the plenaries. So there was one organized in Gettysburg in the USA in January this year. One of the main topics for discussion is to map the landscape of the RDA and to find ways to do road mapping and description of activities. So this led to propose several ways of describing the activities with different points of view, and the discussion was continued during the TAP chair meeting on Tuesday. So there are several different points of view to describe the activities themselves, how they relate to each other, and what they produce. So now there are tests ongoing by different small teams of people to test these descriptions and the way they can be filled, in particular by the group chairs. And the next milestone for that discussion is the next chair collaboration meeting, which is organized by Andy Rober and his colleagues in Vienna in June. Another topic for the TAP chair meeting was the relationship with other organizations, RDA with other organizations, and I think we saw during the plenary this morning, during the presentation of recommendations, that there is a wealth of relationship of RDA with other organizations, and this is something it would be, I think, useful for everybody to be able to track that better. So it's part of the discussion with the chairs. Of course, the resources available to the organization are limited somehow. So for the moment, we are testing different ways of gathering, of which kind of information it would be useful to gather. Then it's clear that the implementation in the near future may be likely limited, but the aim is really to explore how this can be done to be ready as soon as it is possible. Thank you.
Are there any questions for us, Françoise? Okay, so I think I need my other slide back if possible, please. So we move now to the council update, and you will hear from Ross, Amy and Sandra in a moment. Those of you who heard me yesterday morning, I said we were 5 years old this week, actually, since our launch. And I gave you some numbers about the size difference, which I think is very encouraging and are great signs of growth. But they bring with them many challenges which we are all aware of. And in Barcelona last year, there was a community consultation exercise done about different aspects of RDA, and certain points came out from the feedback from you, the members, which also fed into the strategy work that the council itself was looking at. So in the meantime, since then, of course, these sort of 4 pillars have been identified as areas of huge importance, all leading, shall we say, to the sort of more sustainability and stability from an organisational and financial point of view, of course. So those 4 pillars have been broken out, if you like, into sub-committee groups of council with some other support from OAB and TAB and things. And Ross will talk about improving the value of RDA. Sandra will talk about the managing the growth of RDA work. Amy will talk about what's going on in the financial sustainability areas, and Ross will cover the engaging with regions, because unfortunately Fran, who was leading that, is not with us here in Berlin this week. Okay, so I'll pass the floor to you, Ross, to talk about the improving the value.
Thanks very much. In the slide Hilary showed you before about the size of RDA, you can thus see that RDA is around 10 to 20 million euros of effort per year trying to deliver value. So the key question is, how can that deliver maximum value to you and to your stakeholders? So that's the question that we're trying to ask. Edith Herzog is leading that work, and I will imperfectly reflect her views on this. So the first thing is the vision and mission okay? Researchers and innovators openly sharing data across technology disciplines, countries to address the grand challenges of society, with a mission of building the social and technical bridges that enable open sharing of data, with core values of openness, consensus, balance, harmonisation, community-driven, non-profit. We thought it was fairly important to understand what the business of RDA is, which is to provide a trusted, neutral forum for establishing data agreements in order for the work of RDA to occur, which is in fact to build the data agreements. So at the Montreal meeting, we consulted with the people in the audience about, well, is this okay? Is this a reasonable description of why we're doing what we're doing and what the business of what we're doing and how we're going about it? And we got a fairly strong yes, that's fine. However, what we clearly are unlikely to have got right is everything. So when we start, we thought it was more important to get going. Chris Greer was terribly insistent that you just get going. You do stuff, find a model that works at the time, start it off and see how you go. Well, 4.5 years after that, we have done a lot and achieved a lot, but we had a fairly strong encouragement at the Barcelona meeting to think about, well, what next? Because you can't just simply grow along exactly the same lines. So your work now, please pay attention, is to help us in trying to enhance the value of RDA. So there's a lot of ways of understanding the value of RDA. It provides a meeting place where a community of data practitioners can get together and share ideas, develop work. Domain practitioners can look at how the data agreements that are done in general can be applied more particularly in their own areas. It's a place where policymakers and funders can get together to understand what are the trends and directions and how might they influence those, to have conversations with each other on that. It's a neutral third-party place that enables public administrators and legislators to come up with ideas that it would inform policy in all of the various regions and to get greater agreement. To disseminate research data practice around the world and into your own environment. It's potentially a strategic partner for industries and organisations to do early testing of particular solutions to see if they're going to deliver value. To build networks of expertise. In fact, this community itself is one of the values of RDA. So we think that there's a lot of value in all of that. But we're unlikely to have it right. And what I'd like you to be thinking about over the next little while you're listening intently to my colleagues, is what would you be thinking is a thing we should be thinking about and road testing? How should we be working with you on building the value of RDA? How do we take the next steps? What's a business model that might be more effective in enabling us to use the relatively small number of professional staff and the relatively large number of, I don't think volunteers, but discretionary staff who are working around the world on this? How do we make that work more effectively? So we have ideas, but we're very, very interested in hearing your ideas. I remind you that Edith Herzog is leading this work, not me, and she's the one to contact. But on the other hand, we're very interested in hearing your ideas here and now. I'll pause there and hand on to Sandra.
Great. Hi everybody, I'm Sandra Collins. I'm the National Librarian of Ireland and I joined the Council about a year ago, and it's a really exciting time to be working with the Council on developing the strategy with the Secretary General for the organisation. And of course it's really important that the membership are a part of that process through consultation, through these discussions, and that's why I'm really delighted to talk to you about our growth management. So as Hilary said, we have these 4 pillars, and I'm leading the work on looking at the growth management and how do we do that. So we took 2 different approaches to this. We look back and we look forward. So talking about looking back first, a part of, I think, this phase of the RDA is about increasing the professionalisation of the organisation, the support for the members, the outputs and so on. One of the tasks then is to look at the governance bodies. So what we've done over the last period since our plenary in Montreal is to revisit all the governance bodies of the RDA and check the description, bring it up to date, probably challenge ourselves on our processes and our membership and structures, the organisational structures. And that's done now, and you will have a chance, that will be up on the website for you to look at, to engage with in April. So that's the foundational work, but it doesn't answer all the questions about the future and what our strategy should be around growth. So some of the numbers that Hilary presented already, 6,700 members, 3.5 FTE on the supporting staff, the staff dedicated to the support of that organisation, really show how important it is that we reflect on and we think about growth. So if we think of RDA is one of the most thoughtful organisations that I work in, so it's very good attention to balance, inclusivity, coverage, different cultures, different regions, and I think that's really important and really positive thing. Now, looking forward, how do we keep those principles and manage our organisational structure? And there's 2 different things we need to think about. It's managing the growth that we're experiencing at the moment, and that's really, I suppose, without trying to grow the organisation, it's simply making sure the structures are fit for purpose for the growth that we are experiencing, whether we mean to or not. And the second question then is thinking about driving growth. Are there areas or dimensions of growth that we should be focusing on enlarging? Now, when I first thought about this, and it's in conversation with Andrew, and he really, I think, widened the conversation to cover an awful lot more important things. My first thought on growth is the membership number. Every time I come to the conference, it seems to get bigger. The 6,700 members is really an amazing figure for a 5-year-old organisation. But of course, it's not just the membership numbers. That's certainly an important factor. But the other things we need to think about are the numbers of interest groups, working groups, the number of outputs, so what we're producing, our recommendations, all our different outputs, number of cultures represented, number of regions, our coverage, our balance, and I guess something that is probably all on our minds is the staffing of RDA. So if we're looking at 3.5 full-time equivalents, that number has got to grow as well. I guess there's nobody that's going to argue with that one. And I think as well we have to be very strategic about how those factors interrelate. So the 4 pillars of the strategy all connect together, so you see them in a circle, but any one of these dimensions of growth has an effect on any of the others. So it's quite a delicate ecosystem, and I guess what we're going to challenge ourselves to do over the next 6 months before we see you again at the next plenary is to think about this strategically and how we can plot the best path forward for the RDA. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Sandra. And so, speaking of plotting, hi, my name's Amy Nernberger. I'm with the MIT Libraries. I'm also within RDA, the co-chair for the Organizational Advisory Board, and by virtue of that office, have a seat on the council. In this particular session, I'm talking about building financial and organizational sustainability. As Ross mentioned, when we first got started as RDA, the message we received was, let's just get going, let's go do some things, let's do some exciting things. And we did, and we've built this incredible organization. But as part of building this incredible organization, it's incumbent upon us to also think about how do we keep it going now that we've gotten it going? How do we think about our financial and organizational sustainability? This is serious work. And we recognize that there's not one single sterling solution that's going to solve all of those sustainability issues. Instead, we're looking at a diversified portfolio made up of multiple revenue streams from many different areas and from many different aspects. As part of this, we're looking at both defining revenue streams based on the current activities and values that Ross has already described to you, and then also considering those additional activities that would be considered of value. For each of these, we're making sure that it's not just a yes, no type thing, but we do have a process that we're involved in. And the first step of this process is considering whether or not these proposals fit within the policies, the values of the RDA community, because that goes back to the idea that the community is what makes this RDA organization of value, and we want to make sure that we preserve that even as we go forward thinking about our sustainability. Secondly, we're looking at the cost-benefit analysis for each of these proposals. How much does it cost the Secretariat at, as you will now memorize, 3.5 FTE to support going out and possibly pursuing that revenue stream? Do we have the resources to do it, to make it worthwhile, or not? So that's the process we're going through, and quite frankly, it's this process that I blame for Council not pursuing my persistent suggestion to put on Data the Musical as one of our potential revenue streams. But there you go, something for another time. So since evidently Data the Musical is not a viable idea, I invite each and every one of you, please, we welcome all comers, all ideas. Contact me, let me know what you think about how we might consider creating a revenue stream from what we currently do, what we might add of value, and when you present that idea, I encourage you to be as thoughtful as we are in considering how this fits in to the culture of RDA and what it might mean for a cost-benefit or return on investment analysis. Thank you.
Noting the language diversity is not fully exhibited right at the moment, I would like to point out that in my first speech I was representing a Hungarian-speaking, and now I'm going to represent a North American far northern person, all using an Australian accent. I want to turn to the fourth element of the strategy that Hilary enunciated before, which is the regional engagement. So RDA does some of its work through these plenaries that happen around the world. Some of its work is done through late night, early morning phone calls. Some of the work is done in the regions, and we're fairly convinced that we need to work out a much stronger process around how we engage with regions. So in particular, regions do a lot in and of themselves, and so does RDA broadly. What's the relationship that we need to have in place that describes that? So we know that the relationship is complementary. What happens in the region feeds directly into the global success. What happens globally has to influence what's happening in the region. The values have to be shared. The branding is important to get right. So we think it's quite important to work through what does a formal memorandum of understanding look like between the regions and RDA global, to use a term that we're not quite sure of what it should be. But what are the ways in which we're going to agree as to what happens between those different parts? We're pretty interested in that because we think regions are going to do different sorts of things. They're going to support the mission and vision and principles of RDA, but they're going to be doing things locally. They're going to be developing regional programs. We hope that they will be providing cash and in-kind contribution to the RDA bodies and support the volunteer work of the organisation. We want to see money come from regions to support the work of our secretariat. We want there to be a strong regional organisation to make that work. Globally, we need to work with the regions on developing initiatives in the region. We want to support regional leadership in a way that's been somewhat ad hoc to date. We want to try and make sure that the work is coherent and consistent to disseminate regional efforts through the global network. So if there's a particularly important issue to be resolved within a region, it's likely to be important elsewhere as well. So how can we use that work? The plenaries themselves are organised always within a region. So what's the nature of that? So we're hoping to work with some regions over the next little while, regions where they kind of have a brand already, but others where it's more an informal relationship at this stage, to understand what would a template for a memorandum of understanding look like. How might we run that most effectively? How do we resolve differences? So if it looks like there is a potential conflict of interest, some activity might be seen as particularly important in a region, or there might be a commercial opportunity. How do we manage that versus globally? So we want to have a conversation around that. We've invited a few people to help seed that conversation. There is nothing formal or formed, but we have got some initial ideas to discuss. We plan to do that with a few people tomorrow afternoon after the plenary has occurred. We want to use that conversation to drive out a wider agreement as to what this might look like in order to bring it back to the Botswana plenary to see whether that makes sense to you, because you're all from a region. Your regions are going to be very different in nature, and so having something that's completely boilerplate won't work. We're confident of that. And on the other hand, having some sort of basis for that relationship we see as being particularly important. So that's the plan. We have a kind of batting plan for doing stuff now, and we would be hoping to engage with you again more strongly by the time of the Botswana plenary. But equally, we're very interested in hearing your thoughts, so you can convey them to Fran Berman, who is the chair of this particular group. So I think that covers it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ross. Are there any questions before we ask you the question about the value? Mark.
You asked for contacts asked for feedback on these various things and to contact you individually. I have all your email addresses, but I'm not sure everybody else does. Is there some way that the community can easily contact you all?
What we didn't want to do is to use the anonymous, send it into the RDA lens and let the people there. So what we'll try and do is put on the plenary site the 4 email addresses with permission of 2 of them at least. I think the other 2 will be fine with that as well, but I'll check before. But I think what we'd like to do is to get that coming directly to the chairs of those groups, and we'll get those emails on the plenary site associated with this session.
The other thing I would add to that is that any member of RDA, I believe, may be contacted through the RDA website using the contact links as well. So in fact, we are contactable right this very second.
I think it's probably fair as well that there's quite a small portion of the membership in the room. So I would also propose that we summarise in a few sentences this particularly important report out from Council and send it to the rest of the members, and we could include it in that as well, to make sure that the others that weren't able to join us today or here in Berlin are aware of this and could contribute to it.
Just to be clear, I'm very happy to receive email myself if you wish to send that to me.
Did you want them to answer your value question? Would you like to repeat some of them?
If you like, but I'm happy to take suggestions already. I can see enormous queues at each of the microphones, good. So I'll let you speak first and then I'll come back.
Okay. I have the impression that we should be a little bit more caring about our products, the use cases we take care of in the working groups, the recommendations we derive from there. So we should have actually something called data management on our products. So we're a data management organization, so we should eat our own dog food. And that's actually something, if we have all our use cases which are the basis of the working groups out there, that can be seen that we took care of them, and that is valuable to others, actually finding out that there are existing working groups or already recommendations, outputs from RDA available covering their use cases. And that's actually, I think, giving us value as an organization.
Thanks very much for that. I was encouraged by Mark Parsons to attend a meeting looking at the application of our products, and I think it's fair to say it's not yet easy to do that, and so thinking about delivering more value out of the products of RDA is clearly an important thing, so thank you for that. Let me remind you again of the various areas while you stream forward. So we have described value in terms of the meeting place itself, of people who turn up. We've described value around building the data agreements, around a meeting place for policy discussions and funders to organise how that work has taken place, a neutral third party for public administrators and others, a neutral place for industry to seek, test and implement data-related approaches, partner in building standards, improve networks. But fortunately I can stop wittering on because we have a thought.
Yeah, I wanted to again go on with this thing about the use cases. I think it's not just about how products are being implemented or taken up, but even the original use cases could be of interest if they could be extracted from the old work group suggestions. So that could be helpful. I was actually thinking about filming one of the cases which was presented here very nicely and trying to find other such, let's say, high-level use cases or user stories, so to see where all these things fit in. Then I wanted to add, yes, we also would need something like this landscape thing. I have no idea how that could be drawn up to see where things begin to fit, which final thing, I'm just already writing the email to you, Ross, the value of this organization. I have been attending many plenaries since Gothenburg, and I get an increasing sense of that there are things beginning to fit together, pieces beginning to fall into place, And there is some value in that if it can be seen even for newcomers or so. I've observed, I think, many of those where value can be derived, and it would be very interesting. I have no idea how to do that. How do these outcomes, how do these products fit together? Where are the interconnections? Where can people say, well, Anne here this morning said she could leave some things to other groups explicitly. And I have heard that a number of times already. So how can we visualize that? That's a word I have always problems with.
There's a metaphor that we've used consistently over a long period of time of bridge building, but arguably we've been doing rock building, and we don't have terribly many engineering pictures that work out how to use the bridge, and indeed the use cases, what is the particular bridge for, because you might actually want to use different ones in different ways. So I think we've heard a number of times through this meeting the need for something like that. Good.
Just to comment on the use case issue, there is a collection of RDA use cases. It came out of volunteer work from Rainer Stotzka from the Technical Advisory Board. If you go to the RDA groups under coordination groups and scroll down, there's a RDA use cases group with links to use cases from many different interest and working groups. So I'd encourage a discussion starting there. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but I think you'll start to get a flavor of what we have so far. Thanks.
Great to hear this set of updates and the strategy. So Peter Fox, RPI. And this is, as most of my comments are, is very partially formed, so bear with me. Dirk's comment in particular struck me because there's still a reductionist approach within RDA. We've got a lot of things, and I think people who've been around RDA long enough are able to integrate or synthesize various aspects of what's gone on in RDA. There's an RDA story that I don't believe has been told yet, and you know, for better or for worse, it might be an airline magazine article type level. You'd be surprised how effective that sort of framing of what's important, why you would want to get involved, why you would want to support it, why it's good for your region. It doesn't really address growth. It sort of hurts the whole growth management thing. But it might relate regional activities which could be complementary to the sort of the global RDA. But I just want to encourage sort of more from a socio-technical point of view. There's really a story here that has not been told yet.
My name is Sören Au, I'm from TIB. I'm actually the first time at RDA, but I would like to share a bit my impression that RDA, from my perspective, should also focus, and maybe that connects to the use case discussion a bit more, on this bottom-up and getting work done, collaborating, focusing on concrete results. And that's what I don't see that much. Of course, it's partially in the work groups, but maybe RDA as an organization can support us a bit more. So one idea I have there would be, for example, a software repository. It could be a GitHub organization or a GitLab instance where we could share and collaborate on source code, for example. I think there is software produced in individual working groups. Another example is, I think if we want to come from data to knowledge, we need to work on conceptual, on a shared understanding of the data. And from my perspective, these are what vocabularies, ontologies, taxonomies do. Similarly there, we could work together on these kind of artifacts, and I would like to see a bit more fostering of such bottom-up activities in a more internet-style collaborative way, where you use Git, for example, to collaborate on these things, and that's what I think RDA could create much more traction in a way, and also visualize what the results of the individual work groups are. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now ask you to be radical, come up with a silly idea, something that really doesn't fit easily with what we do, that kind of won't work, but nevertheless might be the seed of something that might. Here we go. Here we come. Some silly ideas now, please. So what is it that you think, taking into account what we are, what we might be?
Thanks. So there's a challenge that is very big, and this is repository funding sustainability. So we have a report that just recently came out of the OECD. We have an almost IG with the funders. Please go ahead with that. Whoever's doing it, please do that. And I feel like we could have a really big voice in what it means to say our repositories support our scientific record and our science in the future, and this group could help here. I can't get my head around it, but I have been thinking on this quite a lot.
Terrific, thank you. Didn't seem silly enough. Somebody work harder.
This probably isn't very silly either, but I just wonder where the alliance is with evidence and policy. It's absolutely massive issue that is very much what government is concerned about. It's been a kind of discourse for over a decade. It's not going away, and it's really complicated. There's also, so that kind of goes beyond straight data. It's all kinds of evidence that comes into public policy, but it could really raise the profile of the organisation. And I think there's a big issue for governments and for the community in understanding how to use evidence. So training, I guess, if you want to look for some way of making money, training in how to use data, but particularly around public policy.
Ross, I'm trying to play your game, even though it's not really my opinion. I'm trying to say something silly, or that sounds maybe silly, but how about doing nothing and just supporting actually try less, do more. So I sometimes have the feeling that we're victims of our own success because it's a hugely growing organization and people are working, people are doing stuff. It's 95% voluntary work. It's a huge success. Build on that and not try too hard to form certain output channels, certain output formats, but let people do and invent things. Be completely open to any change.
I'm afraid this isn't silly either. One of the values of RDA is openness, and I've noticed that the last update of minutes from council is 1.5 years ago, and there are no minutes of tab. It would be really useful for us to be able to have some insight into those activities.
All right, I'm going to give it a shot. RDA should spin off a lobbying organisation that dramatically tries to influence funders and governments.
That was a terrific idea, but we had no clue what you said from the front. Sorry, I think most people did because there was lots of applause. Can you just reiterate?
I just told a joke, Ross, that's all. No, that RDA should spin off a lobbying organisation that dramatically influences funders and governments and policies and laws all around the world, including Antarctica.
Got it. Thank you.
So here's a somewhat silly thought, is I'm a member of many organizations that don't charge a fee for participation, but they do ask you for some service component, sometimes a very small component, meaning 1 weekend a month you do something to help out. We've talked about how the RDA membership and the combined expertise of everybody in the body is a real asset for RDA. Maybe ask something simple. It could be trivial, like you're required to submit 10 terms to the Data Foundation and Terminology tool as in need of better definition or clarity. So little taskers that we might give to the body as a form of payment for being a member rather than a fee.
So a couple of wacky ideas, perhaps. Crowdfunding, just putting on your website or on the new website that would be funded by the crowdfunding, because I think there's issues with the website. And asking for an appeal. If people who are interested in this, would they donate whatever, $50 a year? A lot of newspapers now do that, and it's something that people do. I expect many of the members might even do that, and they wouldn't think of it in the sense of we're paying a fee that we have to pay. The other idea, which is more wacky, is there's lots of prizes now from technology companies. Lots of them are around data. Big prizes, big money. How about getting all the RDA, all the expertise in this room to put together a bid for one of those prizes? Can we solve the problem? And the money goes to RDA.
You can be sillier, I'm sure. Somebody coming down? But this is terrific, thank you.
Just as silly as I can be, Ross. Let's have a data car wash. Bring us your dirty data, bring us your dirty repository, bring us your dirty workflow, and we'll help you clean it up.
Terrific, thank you. I don't want to test your patience, but this has been rich. Thank you. Any commentary from my colleagues about the silliness of some of our participants or otherwise?
No one has yet topped Data the Musical for silliness. Come on, I know you're creative people.
I think then, thank you for the feedback on the strategy. We'll start, as I said, with an update on what's a sort of summary of what's going on, but I think frequent updates. As we said, the pillars are working separately at the moment, but all working around one main strategy. So I can't say that I know now if we'll be asking you or going out for comments on things or consultation. We'll clearly be reporting back to you at the next sort of milestone, which is in Botswana. But I think that the point is taken as well about certain documentation, including this and others. And there are some points that came out, of course, that can be dealt with before, but point taken about the documentation and the openness and perhaps without spamming or anything, but increasing perhaps the communication flow. Okay, so thank you very much. And I think that's, would you like to close it officially, Stephanie? Oh, Stephanie has a few announcements for you.
Okay. Before we close the session, just a couple of reminders for tomorrow. So tomorrow morning we start with breakout sessions. Please do not bring large luggage pieces here. The venue won't accept them, and that'll be a problem. Just a reminder, we've heard this before. And the good news, lunch will be available tomorrow for everybody. And apart from that, I would like to thank all the speakers and hope that we'll see all of you at the reception. Thank you very much. Yep.